Today I'm going to tell you two tragic stories of completely different scenarios. One they should have seen coming, the second one could literally happen to anyone. But before we get into that, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. I'm your host, Mr. Biggs, coming to you from the great state of Michigan, a place where we have our own Lake Michigan Triangle that extends from Manitowoc, Wisconsin to Ludington, Michigan, down to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and back to Manitowoc, where we've had numerous ship disappearances, plane disappearances, and our first UFO sighting dating back to 1913. I'm here to bring you true, scary, mysterious, and sometimes the most outrageous stories ever heard on the World Wide Web. Let's get into it. On the evening of August 27th, 1967, 30 skydivers surrounded a B-25 bomber at Ortner Airfield in the town of Wakeman, Ohio, just off the coast of Lake Erie. Now, these skydivers were going to enjoy a complimentary jump from pilot Bob Carnes for a recent performance he had had at a local airfield, and he wanted to pay back the skydiving community. And once the 30 jumpers loaded the B-25, the pilot quickly realized he was overweight and he had asked for just the most experienced skydivers to stay aboard. 10 of them exited the plane. And of those 20 jumpers, every one of them had at least 75 jumps to their name, with 7 of them having over 200. As the B-25 took off down the runway, a small Cessna did the lineup and wait. It was going to take off after the B-25, and its job was to take photographs of the skydivers as they were free falling. Once the B-25 had reached its altitude of 20,000 feet, the skydivers were all dressed in heavy clothing because at that altitude, it was negative 29 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 34 degrees Celsius. So they were dressed in thick, heavy clothing for their jump they were about to do. And this heavy clothing would come into play later on. Now, as Carnes requested his position from the tower's VOR, which means very high frequency omnidirectional range, that tells him the plane's position, he failed to mention to the tower that I can either communicate with you or receive the VOR to know his position. He couldn't do them at the same time. And this B-25 bomber wasn't fitted for skydivers. It still had the bomb bay doors on it. Now, as the pilot was flying in a circular pattern, he had received his position from the tower, but he was absolutely unaware that there had been a shift change, and this new air traffic controller had gave him the position of the Cessna that took off behind him. With this new position, the pilot quickly told the jumpers, "We're jumping in 1 minute." As the bomb bay doors opened, the fuselage was flooded with bright light and the unbelievable sound of rushing wind. There's no doubt it was a little disorienting. The 18 of the 20 skydivers were about to jump, and 2 would remain on board. U.S. Air Force Alan Homestead and Larry Hartman, who acted as the unofficial jump master. They were going to remain behind and jump at 30,000 feet instead of the 20 that the other 18 were going to jump. And Major Homestead, 5 hours earlier, would call the Cleveland International Airport and ask them for a weather report, which he was told to expect heavy cloud cover with pockets to jump. And as the 18 jumpers jumped out of the B-25, they quickly realized they couldn't see anything as there was nothing other than heavy cloud cover underneath them. Now, as pilot Carnes had turned to come back south and change his elevation to 30,000 feet, he had noticed a hole in the clouds, and as he looked down, he turned and he told his co-pilot, Ugh, I hope I didn't drop them over water. As they're falling through the air at approximately 200 feet per second, they realized they did not know where they were. They were trusting on the pilot that they were somewhere over Ortner Airfield. They would encounter the thick clouds at approximately 6,000 feet, and coming into that is going into like a thick fog. You can't see in front of you, and falling at 200 feet per second, getting pelted with small raindrops that just aren't heavy enough to hit the ground has got to hurt. And as soon as they punched through the clouds at approximately 4,000 feet, they would quickly realize their dire situation. They were nowhere near Ortner Airfield. And in fact, they were 13 miles from the airfield. And to make matters worse, they were 5 miles from the nearest shoreline. They were going to land in the middle of nowhere in Lake Erie. As they looked around and quickly assessed their situation, 5 seconds had passed, and they quickly pulled their chutes, so they had already lost 1,000 feet. Their goal was to hurry up and pull them as quick as they could so that way they could drift towards the shoreline, hopefully. They quickly tried to strip away their heavy clothing, because anybody that's ever gotten soaked with their clothes on, you can feel how heavy it is. Now imagine if you're dressed for negative 29-degree weather, you're dressed really warm. You hit that water, minutes, you're going to be exhausted. They're stripping away everything they can, because for the love of God, they don't know how long it's going to take somebody to get out there and rescue them. And if you've ever treaded water for more than 10 minutes, you know how exhausting it is. The other 2 skydivers, Homestead and Hartman, would jump at 30,000 feet and come out over Ortner Airfield. Now, as the 18 skydivers deployed their chutes, off-duty Coast Guard Lieutenant Paul Potter had seen this, and he had quickly notified the Coast Guard so they could set off in the direction of the parachutes. The search would go on for a staggering 53 hours. All said and done, 16 of the 18 skydivers would tragically drown, with the search coming to an end on September 4th once the final body was recovered. The pilot was found to be at fault, as well as air traffic control, and although the 18 skydivers, they said, were not without fault, because it's against the law to skydive through clouds. Now you know the story of the 1967 Lake Erie disaster. In late March 1962 in Mexico City, a young boy was walking home one afternoon and saw something in the grass that caught his attention. He would bend down, pick it up, and examine it, thought it was really cool, and put it in his pants pocket. And what he put in his pocket would change his family's life forever. Now, a few days later, the 10-year-old boy began not feeling well, along with his 2-year-old sister. And while the mother didn't feel the greatest, she chalked it up to, for her, it could be because she's 6 months pregnant at the time. And as she was doing laundry, she had picked up the boy's pants from a couple days earlier, and as she's digging through the pocket, she finds something, and she pulls it out, she examines it, and she figures, well, this is important to him, so she's going to put it in a place that he doesn't lose it. And she decides to put it in the cupboard in the kitchen. Now at this point, herself, her 2-year-old daughter, her 10-year-old son are not feeling well enough that they call the mother-in-law, her husband's wife, to get her to come in and help take care of the family because everybody's sick and dad is out working all the time. That way she could help with family chores, whatever else needed to be done until they got better. And at this point, the mom, the 2-year-old, and the 10-year-old are in and out of the hospital, and doctors are dumbfounded by what's wrong. And sadly, on April 29th, the 10-year-old boy would pass away. And the mother, almost ready to give birth at this time, She's beside herself that she lost her 10-year-old boy. She would lose her battle with the illness as well on July 19th. And while the mother-in-law is gravely ill, it would be till July 22nd that investigators would make a startling discovery. As they're searching their house, they are going room to room, everywhere. And finally, in the kitchen, in a cupboard, they open up the door and they notice all the glassware is black. And right next to it, they knew what the problem was. There, they saw this tiny piece of metal that the mother had pulled out of the boy's pocket, sat in there so he wouldn't lose it. No bigger than this little battery. This little piece that little boy decided to bring home was cadmium-60, a highly radioactive piece of metal. They theorize it had fallen off a scrap truck that was coming from a local hospital that x-ray machines, all this type of stuff could use. And the little boy found it and decided to pick it up and take it home. All told, the 10-year-old boy died, his 2-year-old sister, the grandmother, his mother, that was almost 9 months pregnant at the time, and they figured the reason that the husband didn't die was because he was out of the house and working all the time. Now you know the story of the 1962 Mexico City incident. Thanks for watching. Please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next video, which we're going to go really dark. And I hope you have battery backup night lights, because you're going to need them. Thanks for watching.